power. One of my favorite things to do is to watch you debate Boyce Watkins. And I don't want to call it a debate really, because Boyce often doesn't respond. But when the conversation comes up about Black wealth, about his economic policies, economic strategies, I see you on Twitter, Instagram, etc. You often push back, and your book has become a target of the critique of some of those kind of LLC Twitter, some of the capitalist Twitter accounts. But you've also used your book as a space to critique them. And so what I'd like to hear you talk about just a little bit, or as much as you want, is sort of what is the myth and propaganda of Black buying power?
No, thank you very much. Yeah, it's been wild. The responses have been wild. I've been even thinking of I should write something about just the responses, the reaction to the book. It's been fascinating in many ways. But the argument,
real quick, what people hear, in my understanding, when I watch the Twitter beef, and I spend way too many hours watching you go back and forth, what I think what people assume is that you are rejecting Black self-determination, that you are effectively saying that Black people don't have the capacity to engage in a kind of kujichagulia that will get us some level of liberation. And that seems, in the minds of many, to fly in the face, maybe even disrespect a long tradition of Black people saying we can do for us, by us, in the Black nationalist tradition, in all kinds of traditions. So that's the context I think that people are pushing back against. Now, tell me why they're wrong.
No. No, but that's exactly how what often happens is people hear a snippet, or they hear a line, or they read a title, and they jump to conclusions. Frankly, I'm not aware of anyone who has actually read the book and produced a substantive critique of the actual argument. They're arguing against what I've often not said. So I am not opposed to Black business. I'm not opposed to self-determination. I am not opposed to all forms of nationalist and radical revolutionary nationalist activity. I'm simply saying, and what I had initially hoped for the book was that it would help activist endeavors to get past a mythological hurdle that I think inhibits, and I think am increasingly learning and wanting to produce more work to show is been by design imposed as a narrative solution for Black liberation that appeases and maintains and keeps safe white supremacy and capitalism. So the longer story short is, again, that for years, being an activist in other spaces and just involved and engaged in the media, I've heard what we've all heard, this repeating refrain that Black people have now approaching $1.8 trillion in buying power. And then it's followed shortly thereafter by something along the lines that if we had greater degrees of financial literacy, if we saved more, invested more, bought land and stock instead of rims, weed, and hair and whatever, that we would be able to use those resources to develop in a very independent and revolutionary way an independent Black economy and solve all of these issues, including income and wealth gaps.
Is there any value in that, right? So, I mean, I think about the Black nationalist tradition. I'm thinking specifically, let me be more specific, not just Black nationalist tradition. I'm thinking specifically about groups like the Nation of Islam, right? Who have always had a conservative underpinning, right? They believe in capitalism. They believe in their right-wing moralism and conservative. They're conservative in lots of ways. Maybe I'm just becoming old, but I do see sometimes some value in those arguments, not to negate the issues of political economy, not to negate the critique of capitalism. But the truth is, if people generally were to spend less money on things they don't need, if they were to generally not fetishize capitalism, if they generally spent money in their own communities, our lives would be substantively better. And so it doesn't actually solve the problem that is produced by capitalism as our mode of production. And as long as you're in the context of a class defending state, you're going to have all kinds of problems around mass incarceration, all the things, right? But if I were trying to organize people, and it seems like all the Nation, the Panthers, as we organize people across these traditions, there is some value to teaching discipline, to teaching community investment, things that don't solve the ultimate problem, but maybe get people into a space to even hear the critique you're offering. Do you worry ever that if we go too far to the this don't really work ultimately argument, we don't even get people into the penultimate space?
I have worried about that, and that's why initially I wrote this book with every effort to suppress my actual politics, because I didn't want there to be a distraction with what are my actual politics. I just wanted people to focus on this one myth. So my point is that so ultimately what I'm trying to say is that it's not that there's no value in all that you've described. It's that the problem becomes this is not used as a way to get people into a room to teach more about how the economy actually works and what could be done to upset it, or what our relationship is to it and what could be done to upset that. It's used as a final sort of culminating political goal that will lead us to our salvation. So I'm simply saying there's this long tradition that is as long as this has been argued that has been showing that it doesn't work. So it's and largely because a capitalist economy has already established through what Marx called the primitive accumulation of wealth, has already captured all of the primary and dominant mechanisms for producing wealth in this society. So that's one part of it. So starting businesses is not a solution. It's also not how the wealth of this society was created by those who hold it. So they're even advocating that we do something that others have never done. They didn't start by circulating their dollars and starting small businesses and supporting within their community. The capitalist accumulation was violent. It was land grabbing, genocidal, enslaving. It was war. It was suppression of other economies. It was theft. It was greed. It was murder. That's where all the wealth how they accumulated all this wealth. And then they tell us to do something else. And what I've been learning more and more is that that's been done by design. The argument around Black capitalism has been literally used as a psychological warfare technique to keep Black people away from radically politically organizing through what is our only means of actual power, political organization and movements. So even to your point, if it's understood backwards, if we encourage more in our community to save and spend more frugally and responsibly, we will end up hurting working people in those parts of the economy where many of our people are, who depend on us going to this or that business or spending in this or that. So that's, by the way, how capitalism in this society works. Is 70% consumer based. If people, as we saw during the pandemic, stop spending, the economy collapses and the rich start to panic. So then they have to do all the things that we saw them do, use public policy to create money out of nowhere and redistribute it to themselves. So what I'm actually advocating is that instead of telling us, and I'll come back to a moment how the buying power is actual mythology, but my point ultimately is instead of telling us to business our way to equality, what we should be saying is we should be valued more for our consumption. The consumer, it's the engagement.
What does it mean to value us more for our consumption?
Well, for me, it would be to redistribute the wealth that's created in this world. I mean, we have to remember that, first of all, we were just looking at it. It's somewhere around $150 trillion in private wealth is generated in this country every year. Around $450 trillion in private wealth around the world is generated every year, except only 1% have it. And that wealth is generated through our labor, through our consumption, when we pay bills, when we buy the $10 lattes, when we go to the club, when we buy rims, when we get our hair done, when we buy our clothing, even from our own Black-owned businesses. That is the exchange that creates a profit and creates wealth. The only problem is that is just ever accumulated ever upwards to the point where we have, again, 0.1% have all the wealth. We have 700, Forbes just reported 737 people in this country are worth $5 trillion plus. That's not because they were good business people and what they were. They ate
vitamins and said their prayers. That wasn't how they got it.
No, I was just at a conference where an elder brother told us Black people are poor because we're not going to church enough. We're not morally fit. And that was so disturbing to me. It's so my point is, that just took me back to that moment. But that's the problem. So instead of saying don't shop, we should be saying, no, you should value me more by redistributing that wealth more. So the wealth it's great. So again, I tell the story all the time, but I was at a popular sporting goods store around where I live to buy my daughter her soccer gear. And we get to the cashier and the brother says, would you like to, in addition to this, give some extra money to cancer research? And I said, no. And he and everybody in the line started looking at me crazy. And I was like, Yeah, like you're not going to shame me in front of my child. So I said, look, quick Google, look up the owner of this sporting goods store. He's a multi-billionaire. This store generates billions of dollars every year because I just spent $80 on a soccer ball and some socks.
Why am I donating in his proxy? He should be donating to cancer and me.
Exactly. And you behind the cashier should be making more and working less. That should be, that's what I'm saying. We should all have more, because that's, again, not to go too much into that Marxist guy, but the point is, he made the point, capitalism shows the contradiction of capitalism. It shows we can produce everything we need. Everybody can have what they need. It's if we redistribute it. And so that's really what my point is. So just quickly, because I don't want to lose.
That's actually a good segue. That's actually a good segue to the last thing I wanted to talk to you about.
But real quick, can I just want to clarify one point that about the mythology of buying power. I just want to clarify that the $1.8 trillion, the myth of buying power, and one of the to me, the greatest value of my work here is that I identify what are now, it originally was really just one, but are now 3 key sources for that same mythology. And it's born out of marketing and advertising data. It has nothing to do with the actual income and wealth of Black people. It is based on what they say in their own reports, the Selig Center, that it is estimates and projections based on survey data of what Black people spend as consumers. And it's used to help advertisers and businesses use their ad revenue better to target Black communities. Then the problem becomes too many in the Black commercial press who need that ad revenue want to promote that they have a community of an audience that can buy the products that white ad buyers will want to sell. So it becomes this incestuous myth recirculating process that leaves often Black consumers of that media completely unaware and confused as to how the economy works. So I just wanted us to get past this mythology before we reach whatever solution we want to reach. And in no way meaning to condemn or blame nationalists or Black business people or even the Black capitalist business class per se, that does often benefit as the isolated one group, to relatively speaking, but is to simply say that we are not poor because we've misspent and are ignorant of our finances. In fact, Black people, by studies, show the most financially literate and careful with their money. It's that we're locked in a part of the economy that is meant for pure exploitation. So that's what I wanted us to get past. So